Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by the National Science Teachers Association. Find out more at nsta.org. Welcome to the Lab Out Loud podcast, science for the classroom and beyond. Today we're talking about science safety once again, and all the things that are important for teachers to remember.
The problem for the teacher is they share the responsibility of preventing accidents. So therefore, they must adhere to those safety standards. The teachers have duty of care for the students. In other words, have students achieve training? Are they aware of what the hazards are? Have they been given appropriate personal protective equipment? All those kinds of things are under duty of care to keep them out of harm's way.
And that's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host, Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.
And we're, back with another repeat guest. I think if you start doing a show for 10 years...
Ghosts of episodes past.
It's bound to happen. However, this is a topic that needs to come back and be revisited almost more frequently than we are here doing at Lab Out Loud, and it's the topic of safety.
We are welcoming back to the show Dr. Ken Roy. He is NSTA's Chief Science Safety Compliance Advisor. He also does a host of other things as well, but he's coming to us today to talk about safety, especially because there is a safety blog from the NSTA to address concerns or questions, or just give us some safety information that we need to know for our science classrooms.
Welcome to the show, Ken. Now, Ken, you were a science teacher in the past, right?
Yes. In fact, I'm glad you asked that. I started out as a chemistry physics teacher, and I did that for 35 years. And during that tenure, I became a science chairperson, and then I became a director, which was in Glastonbury, for K-12 science. And I also taught adjunct at a number of colleges.
All right, so where did you see the most science violations, in chemistry or physics?
Obviously, chemistry.
Actually, it was pre-service. It was before I even started teaching in service. I don't know how I got out alive, to be honest with you, my college career. Some of the things I saw were absolutely incredible, some of the accidents and the like. I personally had an accident in my first year in teaching. I was burned by concentrated sulfuric acid. I was never taught safety, and I was pouring some acid with water, concentrated acid, and it shattered the glass, and I got burned. Luckily, I had no scars, but that really was a wake-up call for me relative to the need for safety. And then when I started talking to my colleagues, they all said the same thing. Safety? What is safety? So that's how it all got started. And then from there, I started to see other things happen, like very large classes with an expectation that you were going to do all this hands-on work. And again, with crowded classrooms, insufficient environmental controls and the like, the thing just grew. And that's how I really got into it. It was from my own experience.
Do you see, and this has always been a question that's plagued me with safety, do you see that there are schools, districts, programs that do adjust to science proactively instead of reactively? And the question come about because I often hear about a lab accident, and then classes are tweaked back down to appropriate levels after, the district had a lawsuit or a big scare. Do we see that proactively happening?
Yes. Absolutely. There are those, quote, 1,000 points of light out there.
Tell me the hope. Yeah.
But, first you got to go back to, what makes science different to begin with from other areas like math or English, language arts, those types of things. And the big difference is that you learn science best by doing it. All right. So the point here is that labs are an integral part of the science curriculum. It's very similar to tech ed and art. Those are the three main areas. It's funny, when there's an OSHA inspection, where does the inspector go first? He goes to art, science, and tech ed, because those are the most hazardous areas, right? So when you start there. But having said that, safety training for teachers is absolutely essential, all right, to ensure that these activities are conducted in the safest, and I like to say a safer way. A lot of times people say, well, you put on goggles to make it safe. you can't make it safe because you can still have accidents. So, but what you can do is make it safer. Well, how do you do that? Well, you do it by, first of all, looking what are the potential hazards. Well, in labs, there are three of them. There's biological hazards, there's chemical hazards, and there's physical hazards. So you need to do a risk assessment. That's where you start. And the action piece of it, in other words, well, as a result of what I found, how do I correct these things or make it safer? Well, you need to look at things called, what OSHA calls engineering controls. In other words, they have appropriate ventilation. Do you have an eye wash? Do you have a fume hood? Those kinds of things. Then there are the standard operating procedures. Has your district trained you as required under OSHA, and which are legal standards? And of course, there are better professional practices, which those are fostered like by the NSTA. And also the third thing is personal protective equipment. Do you have the appropriate goggles that you should be using in chemistry lab as opposed to safety glasses? If you're in physics, safety glasses are fine. But again, in the chem lab, safety glasses don't protect you. All right, so you need to have goggles. So again, it comes down to that. So again, the bottom line here is absolutely some districts, to get back to the original question, are proactive because they know that it is the employer, aka the Board of Education and the administration, have a responsibility to train teachers in safety when they're hired, and then also when there are changes. In other words, if you're taking on new chemicals, new assignments, these types of things.
And is that national, or are there different state laws that kind of would change those?
It's very interesting. Let's take Connecticut, for example, where I'm in. If you teach in a public school, you are under what's known as Connecticut State OSHA. It's the Connecticut version of OSHA. If you are in a private school in Connecticut, you're under federal OSHA. If you're in Massachusetts, all right, if you're in a public sector, you're under no OSHA. They have their kind of their own version, but it's not directly under OSHA. And yet, if you're in a private school, you're under federal OSHA. So again, point to your question, yeah, it does vary from state to state. But again, it comes down to this. You either follow the legal safety standards like OSHA, EPA, the National Fire Protection Association, and or you follow better professional practice, those that are set up by your professional organizations like the NSTA, which considers safety its top priority for teachers, administrators, students. And so, again, to answer your question, somehow, some way, every school district is under either legal safety standards and or better professional practice. And I know this specifically because I do expert witness work in the courts. And because I know where all the minefields are, unfortunately for schools, the parents hire me when the kid gets hurt. And what I look at is, because I'm the one that determines if, in fact, there is liability for the teacher and or the school district. And the court wants to know, have legal safety standards been followed? Have better professional practices been followed? And this is how they judge what that level of liability is for the school and the teacher.
So it's safe to say that every school district, the new teachers should receive safety training from the district, and every teacher should, say a science teacher should receive safety training when there are changes made.
Absolutely. So basically we're looking like on an annual basis.
Now, is that training, is it like, here is the binder, you're responsible to sign off and read it, or does it have like more stringent like face-to-face requirement training or something like that?
Yeah, OSHA really likes to have direct types of training. They do allow to have some types of electronic, internet access types of things, or there's a program, but they say that you need to have someone that is knowledgeable that can interact with the audience to take questions, for example, which is absolutely right on the mark.
I guess my question was, can it be the training is passive, or that the teacher has to go get it, or that the school district has to bring it to them?
this technically, to begin with, the school district should be bringing it to them. But having said that, case in point, here in Connecticut, I run a program with Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, and we meet monthly, half a day each month, and it's teachers who are getting their training that their district is supposed to be providing through our organization. They come to the seminars to get their training, so that counts. In other words, that's allowable. You can do that. But we're kind of unique. There aren't a lot of states that have that kind of a statewide program.
Okay.
So yeah,
now,
my head is spinning a little bit.
I bet.
And I don't want to,
what keeps you up at night, Ken? Is there, if you could narrow down, like, these are the most risky things in a science classroom, what's the one or two
what's your
or
top
three?
10 t-shirt?
Yeah, what's the things like, if we could just have this happen in every school, what would it be?
I'll tell you, it does vary. It depends, and it can be something like you're in an old facility that you should not be doing any kind of hands-on activities because you don't have the appropriate engineering controls. They're not designed correctly. They're not functioning. It can be that type of thing. It could be a situation where, in some ways, you are not even certified as a chemistry teacher, and yet your state allows you to teach one subject area or one course outside your certified area. And I see this as a growing concern.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely
for
is.
school districts doing this. And that is, talk about lack of safety and understanding of what science is to begin with. So that's a big problem. Down in the trenches, I would say that probably one of the biggest issues we have is this situation with the demonstration of methanol. The flame test, the rainbow demo type of thing, and I'm sure you guys have heard or read about it. It's been all over the news. And
I don't know anything about it.
Come on.
Like a whoosh tube kind of.
How did I miss this?
It's not probably over the last 5 years. It's really
There's been a handful of cases that have been
yes, there have been, and
really bad.
Involved with a number of them in expert witness work, and it's a sad situation. But when you look at each of these, what do you find? You find, first of all, that the teacher was not properly trained. They were not following safety protocols. They were in a laboratory that was not equipped to have this appropriate type of safety equipment in there for them to do this. There's a variety of things. Well, how do you rectify all of this type of stuff that's going on?
There's a few things that are going through my head. When I was teaching, a lot of these things were passed down from these are activities or favorites that were
oldies but a goodie.
Yeah, they came from the old guard or the wisdom of my mentors, and I admit I had done the methanol, I had done some methanol stuff in the past, and after talking to you the last time, I thought, I can't do that anymore. No, and I absolutely admit that it's something that if I were back in the classroom, I would not be doing anymore.
Yeah. Well, the problem for the teacher is they share the responsibility of preventing accidents, all right? They share that responsibility. They have shared liability, as we say. So therefore, they must adhere to those safety standards. Again, and I want to circle back to, OSHA, International Code Council, Fire Protection Association, EPA, all of those things. And unfortunately, pre-service teachers are not trained in this area, with some exception. But most universities do that because they say they don't have enough time to do it. You know what?
Correct.
Safety needs to be job one.
Well, but I even think about that. Now, let's just disregard the fact that everyone taking a science class in a university is going to go to teaching. We know that that's not the case. But I often felt that there was not enough safety being taught at the university level going through those classes, regardless of your direction. That it was all assumed that you're in the lab and you're taking on this risk, and you may have some protocols to follow, but at the same time, you have experts that should be able to at least describe some of the safety risks here and there.
I'll tell you, I found through my experience, through all my degree work, over all the decades that I've done this work, it has been anemic at best. anemic at best. And it's still that way. My grandson graduated 2 years ago. The university remained nameless,
Yeah.
but he used to contact me on a regular basis. He says, I can't believe what they're doing. I can't believe we're doing this stuff without eye protection. Isn't that? He says, and when you bring it to their attention, they, oh, don't bother. We never had an accident.
Well, and then I also think the fact that they're legal adults changes that, just basically view in a university classroom. And I'm just guessing. And by all means, this is not excoriating university professors, because I believe that they're doing a fantastic job in many respects. But
Absolutely. But they legally have what is known as duty of care. This is what we look at in the court. In other words, and it's even true at the K-12 level. In other words, the employer, the Board of Ed and the administration, have duty of care for their employees, as the employees, the teachers, have duty of care for the students. And that's what you look at. In other words, have students achieve training? Are they aware of what the hazards are? Have they been given appropriate personal protective equipment? All those kinds of things are under duty of care to keep them out of harm's way. So it doesn't matter if you're in an elementary, a middle, a high school, or if you're at the university level, there still is duty of care. So the university level does not get out of that responsibility.
So now, Ken, we're in a political season right now, and I'm curious, how much does safety factor into politics this way? The reason I ask is I'm thinking about certain candidates that might say, we need to relax regulations and so forth. Is that how does safety factor in there?
Hornet's nest, Brian. Hornet's nest.
Yeah. That's a loaded question. Well, again, I am very much supportive of regulations that are going to help protect people. And regulations, again, like, for example, OSHA and what OSHA does. You want to talk a political hornet's nest. Every time OSHA wants to do something, there's tremendous lobbying pressure on them. And this is why, in some ways...
Against them is what you're saying.
OSHA, what was that?
Against them, lobbying
against
them.
No, yeah, they lobby against them because they don't want these changes because they're afraid it's going to cost more money, it's going to cost more time, this and that. You know what? I'm sorry. When lives are at stake, what I see happening in labs and some of these accidents, I mean, there are kids and there are teachers whose lives are ruined. They're deformed, they're this, they're that, whatever. And it was all situations that never should have happened if they had had proper safety training.
Sure.
And, so, yeah, I'm for regulations that are going to help protect people.
Well, your blog, which you have started at the NSTA Communities.
Yeah, let's talk about your blog now.
Yeah, okay, that's a good idea.
Danced around that a little
Yeah, well, actually, you just mentioned students, so that's how I was looking at your new blog, which is started over the summer or last June.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the post that drew my eye right away is starting the new school year. We're a little late, but that's okay. 7 safe science strategies, and number 4, as you mentioned, students, is student safety training. Now, what can you tell us about student safety training? Is that an area that's being well addressed, being missed?
Again, when the teachers are trained, they realize and are told that they must, because they have duty of care, they must also train their students. And I think very honestly that's almost, I don't even want to say a genetic thing, but I mean, it's just a situation where, someone's under your care, you don't want them to get hurt, obviously. So whether a teacher's being trained or not, I think they automatically say, you know what, I got to be careful here. I want to make sure nobody gets hurt. Because I always say, what if it was your own kid in that classroom? Well, of course I want them to be safe. Mm-hmm. So in that respect, yeah. I think almost all teachers, in fact, do embrace that and do, in fact, the training. So what I tell them is, you know what, before a kid picks up a test tube, before they light a Bunsen burner, you let them become aware of what are the safety procedures that need to be used, what are the safety concerns, what are the risks, all these things. So the bottom line is, yeah, you get safety training first. Once you're trained, all right, let's see how much you've learned. So there needs to be a safety assessment. There also, once that's done, also needs to be a safety acknowledgement form, which the NSTA has on their safety portal, a model one that you can use. This is similar to what districts use for contracts, except the problem is with contracts, legally, unless the kid's the age of majority, they really don't hold up in the court. But a safety acknowledgement form, basically the student and also the parent guardian has a list of procedures and are acknowledging the fact that the lab can be an unsafe place unless you follow these procedures. So yes, safety training is absolutely critical, not only for teachers, but also for students. And in most schools, I honestly do believe, anecdotally at least, that this is being done. And it has to be done.
Another thing that caught my eye is one of the titles of your blog post, How Safe is Your Eye Wash? And the reason that resonated with me is because I see all different types of eye wash stations. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's very interesting also. I do a lot of inspections. School districts hire me to do, I'll call mock OSHA inspections. I have no regulatory authority when they hire me in that respect. But on the other hand, I can show them, because I am and have been trained as an authorized OSHA instructor. I went to OSHA Training Academy, and so I know what the inspector is going to be looking for. So when you're looking at, you go into the lab and you want to make sure that the engineering controls are working. Several years ago, I went into a lab and I noticed that there were concentrated bottles of hydrochloric acid out in the lab. So I went over and I tested the eye wash and I turned it on and this mollaginous gook comes out.
Yeah.
I said to the teacher, I said, "What's up with this?" She says, I have a work order in to maintenance. She says that they're coming here to fix that. It's been that way for a while. I said, okay, wait a minute.
Yikes.
So you know that this is not working properly, and yet I noticed you're doing a lab with concentrated acid.
Not only do you know, you documented it with the work order.
Yeah, exactly. That was the response. I said, you realize the liability, especially, God forbid, if a kid needs that and it's not working. I said, you have negligence, potential negligence lawsuit, because you were aware that that engineering control did not function properly, and yet you went ahead and did this.
At least you had a work order in, though.
I never knew that. So again, that comes part of training, all right? If she had known that, she wouldn't be doing those labs, because if you don't have the appropriate engineering controls, standout procedures, or personal protective equipment, you don't do the lab.
So now I worry about a situation like that, Ken, where you don't have the right equipment and you don't do labs, and the administrator basically will defer to, well, we can't afford to fix it or take care of this properly, so you may not do this anymore, or you may not, you may not use any chemicals or acids or whatnot. Where do we stand there?
Well, that, if in fact that does occur, it should only be a temporary thing, because this is now when you start to engage parents, because you want kids to have an equal playing field across the board. And if all of a sudden the administrator is saying, well, we can't afford this, we can't do that, so you're not going to do any of this hands-on stuff, even though the curriculum says it. So we're really not doing any lab work. And oh, by the way, when you are attesting to the fact for colleges that a kid has had 1, 2, 3 years of a lab science, because that's what has to go down on the kid's record, and you're not doing that, you got issues. And when the parents find this out, I'm not calling for revolution, don't misunderstand me, but and this is a last resort, but sometimes you need to get parent involvement, because they put pressure on the Board of Education to, in fact, make sure these things are rectified. And the other piece of this, of course, how do teachers know about all this stuff? I have to keep circling back to the NSTA. And I really view the NSTA almost as I'm not being dramatic here, but as a lifeboat.
Sure.
And the oars of that lifeboat are all of these opportunities that NSTA provides. In other words, their conferences, their training programs, their safety blog, because the blog is an opportunity to reach and engage science teachers around the topic of safety. What's nice about this is I have my monthly commentaries that you referred to, but also you'll notice that there are a string of comments. In other words, if I'm a teacher, I'm a brand new teacher, or I'm in a brand new position somewhere, I've never taught chemistry, I never taught physics, I'm not certified in those areas, or even if I am, I haven't taught it in a long time, I might have questions. I can actually go right to that blog. I can post it. I will comment on every one. Then I can other teachers out in the field will also follow up with their comments. So this is a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So now on that piece of that, you have a few posts that say, I got a question about an email, and some of these I'm not going to say are embarrassing, but you might have something that you don't want to admit publicly on a blog within a comment. However, you might. So there's the one that says, how do I get rid of lithium nitrate and mercury nitrate? And, some other people might say, oh my gosh, you still have that. So that might be an embarrassing thing. It reminds me of like the sex ed talks where the kids write down questions that they're too embarrassed to say. So this, you're saying this is a vehicle then for people to air their embarrassing situations to you without fear of public excoriation. And exactly.
This is a safe space.
Well,
people.
The other,
Literally.
Yeah, in other words, you have two options. You can either go right online to the blog and list your comment, or you can email me directly and I will put it on there, but it will be anonymous.
Okay.
And you'll see there are a number of them that are anonymous.
Yes.
And it is unfortunate, but sometimes school districts look down on teachers that are concerned. I hate to say this, but it's true. Again,
it is true. Yeah.
Relative to safety, because they don't want to be on the front page. You talk about political, right? They don't want to be on the front page of the town newspaper.
Well, and in this day and age, you don't want to have a digital trail if there were to be an issue in the future.
Yes, this is true.
And it opens up all these extra costs that, like, oh gosh, we don't have dedication for that yet, and it needs to be addressed. I just want to, listeners who want to go check out this blog, I know I talked about the eyewash thing, but this should entice you to go read it. Eyewash stations that are not properly maintained may serve as a breeding ground for a host of organisms, and Ken writes on. Oh, God.
Dale doesn't like biology.
No, I'm not just going to look at every single one of those and scrutinize them.
They have found Legionella in some of these.
Oh, sure.
I know this from several state departments of health, that they have come in because there have been problems and illnesses, and they have found Legionella. I mean, you're talking serious stuff here. So again, and OSHA says, you must follow the flushing protocol, which means the manufacturers, just about everyone that I'm aware of, requires it to be flushed once a week. All right? And that prevents the chemicals and the biologicals from mounting up in that eyewash. So when you need it, you don't want a situation where you're going to bathe your eyes in a liquid that's going to be worse than the exposure you had to the acid.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So you want to make sure that it's kept in good shape. So there's maintenance for all of these things that are required. And that's one of the things that OSHA looks at when they come in. They want to see the log. They want to know when it was done, how often, and who did it.
I'm noticing there's no visuals. There's links, but there's no pictures. You almost need an Instagram for good safety and bad safety, where you can kind of showcase that as a way to say, are you up to snuff, or does your lab look like this? I would be posting a picture of the sink that I blew up once. I'm embarrassed about that, but also a little proud of it too.
Okay, that's a little TMI. Much information. I will take that under consideration, Howard. That's a good idea. But again, we are, and it's not, again, not the other oars that are in that NSTA has in his lifeboat for the teacher. And I say lifeboat, not a life preserver, because this is for a group of people. It's more than one. Preserver is for one person, basically. A lifeboat is for many, and you work together to survive even. And that's what this whole analogy is for the lifeboat and these oars. What are these things that NSTA provides? I mean, they have the listservs, which again I'm actively involved with. If there's questions about safety, I'll respond there. They have the safety portal, which their safety advisory board lists papers that they've written on occupancy load, overcrowding, and they have legal reviews of those things to make sure that they're up to snuff. You have the NST website, you have the store with all the publications. I mean, on and on and on it goes. So
there's a lot of resources.
Yeah, there's absolutely. So to me, there's no excuse.
There's another topic, before we let you go, there's one thing that's been emerging a lot makerspaces, the STEAM and STEM movement. You get things like 3D printers. And, I've had discussions, and I've tried to do some research myself for something as simple like a 3D printer. Parents get involved with an activity. They want to, let's say, print a cookie cutter or something that's going to be touching food.
Used with consumables, yeah.
Using PLA. There's other different things out there. There's different electronics. There's, little carving machines, all these kinds of things. Have you done any work in that realm of the makerspace, maker movement, the STEAM kind of kits and things like that?
Actually, yes. My consultant's business, I've done a lot of work. I've done inspections, in fact, for schools that focus. There have been, STEM types of magnet schools and this type of stuff. I've also written articles on it. In fact, I wrote an article, co-authored it with a Dr. Tyler Love. We did this through a publication of the International Technology and Engineering Educators Association that was done a few months ago. People think that, oh, wow, here's this great technology, 3D printer, and be it in a makerspace, be it in a science lab, in a tech ed lab, well, they're not so safe. And that's because the research has been lean. Unfortunately, with technology, the technology's out there before the research results are in. And they've only been around, the research has only been going for like 4 years or so. But
yeah, and I would say that, some makers in the, quote unquote maker movement, the amateur nature is almost like a badge of honor to be celebrated. Yet, the research is thin on some of these things. And, when a school dives in with young children, what are the look-fors is my question.
I've gone into elementary STEM magnet schools, and I see elementary kids using power tools.
Yeah.
All right? Have had no training. None. Zip. All right? And I'm saying, my gosh, do you guys realize the liability you have of this? Never mind that. The teachers haven't had any training. All right? And the other piece of this is, everybody, they're jumping in on the STEM train, which is good. Don't misunderstand me. But a lot of times what's happening is they will take a science teacher, throw them into the makerspace and say, oh, by the way, we're sure you know how to operate these band saws and these table saws and, this, that, and whatever, or even welding. So just go ahead and do it. No, you don't touch that stuff until, again, under duty of care, you have been trained, and then you train those kids.
So you supervise them.
Even
too,
something like soldering. I see soldering approaching young age.
Yeah,
and I think it's good. I think introducing some of these things is good, but not part of the how-to needs to be how to be safe first.
I want to circle back to the fact that you need to have training. You need to have assessment. You need to have an acknowledgement form. And also, if you're unsure about things, go to the NSTA. You've got a variety of venues that are out there, like the blog, which I don't have to mention again, of course, but or the listservs or the portal. I mean, there's so many things in this lifeboat that can help you survive. Yeah, and again, my bottom line here is you learn science best by doing it. One of the things I'm talking about is not to scare people, but just to prepare them to make it safer, so it will be a positive, memorable experience.
Ultimately we train these kids to learn about the world. Other times we say, like, these are experiences that they may have as a scientist or working in industry and stuff like that. If you work in those places, you're going to experience these same standards about safety anyways.
It's about the process. Now, you can take this process and apply it to your workplace once you get out of school. So, or even if you have a part-time job, looking at these things, what's the process? The risk. What's the risk? What safety precautions should I be taking? So you can transport that to other pieces in your experiences that you go along in life.
Absolutely. Well, Ken, thanks so much for talking to us again, and we'll put all the links definitely to the blog and the resources that NSTA provides on our website. Ken, thanks again.
Ryan, Dale, you guys are the best.
For links and other information related to this episode, visit laboutloud.com. You can send us your questions and comments at laboutloud.com/contact.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure you've subscribed on iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, or your favorite podcasting platform. And if you really enjoyed it, consider leaving us a rating or a review. Your feedback helps others find our show.
Until next time, I'm Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel.